May I ask, is there going to be any intention to refer to the material that may not be made public?
No.
No. In that event, I need only read out the first part of the usual warning. Everyone will know what I'm going to say. Apologies. Those who've got electronic devices may use them to transmit silently what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 10 minutes has elapsed. That is so as to coincide with the live link, which is going to transmit what happens here, but only after a 10-minute delay. Electronic devices may not be used for recording or photography. Yes. Are there any Rule 10 questions?
There are no Rule 10 questions from me, sir.
Yes, sir. I just have two areas of questioning.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask that the document, one of the documents that was brought up earlier, number 36942, particularly about NVDA training, if I can. Yes. Do you have the document? This was the document, Ms. Moore, that you were taken to concerning the training for non-violent direct action. And I really wanted to talk you through or give you an opportunity to fully describe the nature of the training, because certainly yesterday, during the evidence of HN 65, there was the non-violent direct action training done by CND. And are you able to say whether this was CND's training?
I'm afraid I'm not, no. I really can't remember, and I haven't got a record of where this one came from. I think I've got another document, and I don't know which went with which actions, I'm afraid.
Okay, but just really in terms of understanding it, if one was to gain the impression that this was about how to do direct action, was any part of the training, for example, about how to cut fences or anything like that?
Oh, goodness, no.
And so what was the focus of the training that was being given?
It was very much about supporting each other in a situation, and very much as well about police too. You know, if there was to be any arrest, that you tried not to make the situation worse for yourself, and also or for the police person involved as well. You know, but yeah, very much it was about a solidarity, I think, as well, of just watching out for each other in terms of the training itself, and exploring feelings about it.
Okay. And the sort of things that were being contemplated there, certainly one can see if one goes to the second part under actions. It refers to weaving wool, link arms, singing, lying down, raises the question about will you talk to the police or be silent? How will you keep warm? Will you work in shifts? What do you like eating? And so forth. What was the approach that these triggers were seeking to lead or educate you about?
It does look like a typical sort of Greenham action where, I mean, on these kind of training occasions too, there would probably be quite a lot of women. I don't know if this was mixed or not, or whether there were men who hadn't done anything like that before. So there were suggestions there of things that you might do, which seemed typical of Greenham, weaving the spider webs, you know, linking arms around the base, singing.
And then right towards the bottom of the page, there's some points. Pairing with a group is one form of peacekeeping. Can you remember what you were being told or taught so far as that was concerned?
Sorry, I'm struggling a bit with the sun being in my eyes here.
Okay.
Over in Bristol. Pairing within a group in
Is
one form.
one form of peacekeeping. Each person can look after their partner, knowing in advance what situations they find really upsetting and being able to support them.
Yeah, it
And
sounds
then-
like.
You go on.
I was just going to say, it sounds like good common sense, really, doesn't
Okay.
it? You know, looking out for people to ensure that it really is a non-violent activity, and just keeping an eye on other people.
And then there was a suggestion about earrings, long hair and pigtails can cause a problem if going limp on arrest. You may get dragged along by them. Do you remember anything about what was being said about that?
Well, sadly, that did happen a lot around Greenham Common, and it got worse after the end, around 83, I think. You know, there was a lot more rough handling of women at Greenham. I think we saw something of it in an extract of a film in the opening statements, and people did get injured. I mean, the feeling was amongst us that, in retrospect, you know, that the political stakes have been up and the government coming in more heavy-handed. But we're obviously trying to protect ourselves and each other with those instructions. Sound very sensible, yeah, watching out for earrings and long hair that might be pulled. There were some horrible incidents.
Yes. Well, now, then you were asked about your cooperation with the authorities and the police, and I'm going to ask that document number 36950 is brought up. This, I think, is a document that you yourself exhibited.
Yes, it's a rough draft, a very rough draft of a letter to the council, yes.
And I just wanted to ask you about this. Was this is a draft that you kept in your possession, having written to the council?
Yes.
And did you write to the council in the terms identified in this rough draft?
I imagine so. I do know that Jane Hickman and I did this approach to the council together and had meetings with them. So I might have had some discussions with Jane before it went off. I think Jane might have a copy of a letter too that it relates to this.
And were you in any way seeking to be obstructive with the authorities in relation to the activities that you embarked upon?
Absolutely not. Just as described, you know, I think we were going out of our way to not cause any kind of trouble and be on the right side of things, get the public on the right side, and the council too, in terms of where we situated ourselves, cleaning up after ourselves on the common, which we did do very tidily. You know, we wanted to keep the council on our side and meet with them to discuss how we might best go about locating the camp, what would be the best part of the common to put it on, etc.
Yes, well, thank you very much. That concludes my questions. And I only say this, if there is anything you feel you need from your evidence to clarify to Sir John Mitting, now is the opportunity to do so. Was there anything that arose during the course of the morning that you felt needed any clarification at all?
I think most things have been covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I understand that I may call you Hilary without offence.
Yes, I prefer.
Hilary, thank you very much for the assistance that you've given to me. You probably do understand that bringing events of 40 years ago or so to life with live human evidence is immensely helpful, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have to rise again for a moment or two to enable the hearing room to be set up for a live witness, not off a screen. Thank you.
do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Can you state your full name, please?
Yes, it's Jane Hickman.
My name is Rachel Naylor and I'm one of the inquiry counsel who's going to be asking you questions this afternoon. You made a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 22nd of December 2023 of 99 pages, and there are 17 exhibits that have been published. Is that statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
That puts the whole of your witness statement into evidence. We need only dwell on certain parts of it now. By way of introduction to you, I think it's right that you've been a solicitor since 1977.
Yes.
And you worked in various positions in the fields of employment law and housing law. And in 1980, you joined the legal aid firm Fisher Meredith.
Yes.
This is the period of your life that we're going to explore a little more this afternoon. But thereafter, you were the founding partner of the firm Hickman and Rose in 1991.
Yes.
And in 2007, you were appointed as a commissioner on the Legal Services Commission, and you retired from the Hickman and Rose partnership in 2016 and have been non-practicing since November of last year. Is that correct?
Yes, save that I did end up getting a practicing certificate and returning to practice, I think, in January last year. And I'm still a solicitor, practicing solicitor.
You were involved in 3 groups reported on by HN33, Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, Lambeth Women for Peace, and the Greenham Women Against Cruise Missiles.
Yes, so I understand.
If we could look firstly in more detail at Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, I think it's right that you were first introduced to Greenham Common when you represented some women who had been arrested at Greenham Common for occupying a sentry box in 1982. We've already heard mention of this in the summary of Rebecca Johnson's evidence.
Yes, that's correct.
And you describe in your witness statement that representing those women for that occupation of the sentry box renewed your interest in the politics of peace and disarmament.
Yes.
So is it right that your professional engagement with Greenham Common led you to a personal engagement with it?
Yes.
And your association with Greenham continued for another 3 years?
Yes, broadly.
I think you've said in your witness statement you were involved in Greenham Common as a solicitor from 1982 to 1985, still sometimes giving advice in 1986.
I was, yes.
And your personal involvement in Greenham Common as an activist was more like 1982 to 1983?
Probably, yes.
And what was the balance of the two for you between professional and personal involvement in Greenham Common?
I would say it was more a professional engagement, and I was very supportive of it and very enthusiastic about it. But I had a huge amount of work, professional work, and I was therefore only able to give my time to Greenham on rare occasions.
Can you help us in a general sense with what your perception was of the aims of Greenham Common?
I think it was always very clear that it wanted to win over the public to the view that nuclear weapons were an unmitigated threat to peace, both nationally and internationally, and that the sooner we could negotiate them away, the better. And the purpose of doing that was to put pressure on politicians to arrive at the same conclusion.
Was there an element of Greenham that was a feminist element in terms of a self-governing feminist community?
Yes, that was very strong. It was integral to Greenham.
Can you help us with how Greenham women decided what actions they would take? How was decision-making taking place at Greenham?
Well, I wasn't privy to the decision-making at Greenham as it went on, so what I learned about it was in retrospect and often through representing women. But I understand it was done round the campfire, because if you were to visit Greenham, then when you got to the Yellow Gate, there would almost always be a fire burning, certainly in the period when I was there, and a lot of women sitting around. It was very informal, but on occasions they'd gather together and make decisions about future plans.
Was your understanding that those plans were openly discussed or discussed in secret?
Openly, I would say.
Was there any difference in that, where it was a big planned event where lots of people from all over the UK were attending versus a spontaneous event, in terms of the openness or secrecy of the discussions?
Well, I think it's a bit difficult to say. I would say that there were different core groups at Greenham, and any of them might sit down and plan something spontaneous, and it wouldn't necessarily extend to those who weren't resident or there a fair bit, as far as that group was concerned. But there was no way that women got barred from being at Greenham or participating in decision making.
Was there a difference in the openness of decision making where the planned actions were illegal versus legal?
I don't believe so. The whole point of doing illegal action was to draw public attention.
In terms of your personal involvement in Greenham Common, I think in your witness statement you've said that you attended one demonstration in December 1983.
Yes.
And you camped twice at Greenham Common.
Yes. I think I was at a demonstration. I was at the weekend of Embrace the Base in 1982 as well. So those were the 2 weekends when I was at Greenham. And camping twice, yes. I remember one was the December 82 demo, and I can't remember what the other one was.
And is that really the extent of your personal involvement in Greenham Common?
Well, I know I visited the camp on other occasions because I would sometimes see witnesses there, and I might go there if I was down at court.
And you've made clear in your witness statement that you made it clear at the time that you weren't prepared to break the law yourself in terms of your own involvement.
That's correct.
Turning to your involvement in Greenham as a solicitor, can we look, please, at a document UCPI 14796? So it's B18 in the Jane Hickman bundle, 14796. Really, I just want to look at paragraph 3 of this document, but
yes,
to put it into context, 27th of November 84, meeting of Lambeth Women for Peace.
Oh, yes.
18 women were present.
Yes.
And paragraph 3 describes you, Jane Hickman, solicitor for the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp. We'll come back to the detail of this report later.
Yes.
What was your role as a solicitor in relation to the Greenham women?
Well, I represented individual Greenham women, and I represented those individuals who formed themselves into Greenham Women Against Cruise Missiles. But I couldn't say that I was a solicitor for the peace camp because it didn't, as an entity, instruct anyone.
What proportion of Greenham women did you represent? Can you estimate that?
A minute fraction.
Were there other solicitors involved in representing women from Greenham Common Peace Camp?
I think not initially, but by the summer of 1983, I think there were other firms involved.
What kind of offences were women charged with that you were representing?
Always very low level. There was breach of the peace, which wasn't actually a criminal offence. It would be a civil under the 1381 Justices Act, I think. Criminal damage, obstructing the highway perhaps, and of course the theft of the US Air Force bus.
And I think there were also civil cases that you acted on.
Yes.
relating to trespass, injunctions and bylaws.
Yes.
Approximately how many Greenham cases, civil and criminal, did you act in?
Well, numerically, I can't really remember. I know there were 3 or 4 main ones, but there were a host of little ones.
You say in your witness statement that over time the women gradually began representing themselves,
Yes.
and there was little more you could usefully do for Greenham clients by mid to late 1985.
Yes.
To your understanding, and without breaching the LPP between you and
Yes.
your clients, why would Greenham women break the law?
Well, they always expressed it to me in terms of an overwhelming conviction that the horror and damage of nuclear weapons being used was so grave and such a genuine threat that it was necessary, where appropriate, to break the law in some minor way to draw attention to the threat.
Are you able to speak to whether they did this lightly?
I think it varied. I think initially it was I think for everybody it was a serious decision. But certainly as time went on, some were rather more flippant about it.
Let's look now at Lambeth Women for Peace. We've obviously heard in detail from Hilary Moore this morning. You were involved, I think, from late 1982 or early 83 through to the second half of 84.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
And after July 1984, you've said in your witness statement, from that point onwards you attended very few meetings.
Very few, yes.
But remained a sympathetic supporter.
Oh, yes, yes.
How did you come to be involved in Lambeth Women for Peace?
I can't remember how I learned about it, but it was very shortly after it set up. And I'd had the introduction of the first, the Sentry Box case, and I felt very enthusiastic about the cause. So when I heard there was a local group, which meant I'd be able to participate more fully, I eagerly seized the opportunity and rolled up at one of their meetings.
And what was your role in Lambeth Women for Peace?
Well, I was just a member.
Were you involved in protests and pickets and things like that?
Yes, I did go on some protests and pickets. I do remember being outside the Imperial War Museum on Hiroshima Day. I remember picketing outside Sainsbury. And I know there were a few others I can't bring to mind. And of course the Peace Camp and the St Matthew's Day and so on.
We'll come on to looking at some of those. Were plans made by Lambeth Women for Peace discussed openly or kept secret?
No, they were discussed openly.
And what was Lambeth Women for Peace's relationship with Greenham from your perspective?
It was hugely supportive. I know Hilary's described how it became one of a number of causes over time, and that was happening by the time I left. But I don't think its loyalty to Greenham ever wavered.
Are you able to assist us with whether a planned action at Greenham was always communicated with LWP? How good was the communication between Greenham and LWP?
Well, it was a bit difficult to know because much was going on at Greenham that wouldn't be raised at LWP, but I wouldn't always know about it. I would think LWP would have been contacted whenever one of the major actions was contemplated, where the women at Greenham wanted to bring in big crowds from the outside. And there were also back channels of communication because really the whole of the women's peace movement was some kind of network. There were many nodes and contacts between different groups and women.
We've already seen this morning, and I don't think we need to turn it up again, but HN33 in her witness statement says, in order to report on the Greenham Common Peace Camp without having to camp out permanently there, I infiltrated LWP, a support group. Do you agree that the choice was either to camp permanently or access through a support group?
No, I don't.
Do you sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think it was ever legitimate to go and plant herself in a group that was not any threat to public order, wasn't subversive, didn't want to overthrow democracy simply because it was convenient, and saved her from what she perceived as the need to go and camp in a damp sleeping bag. It's like moving into somebody's spare room because you've decided you're going to surveil the family discussions.
You've referenced this, but elsewhere in HN33's witness statement, she says LWP represented a challenge to public order in their numbers and ability to cause disruption. From your perspective, do you agree with that?
I think it's nonsense. I did much public order work, and public disorder would break out only if participants either wanted to or weren't committed to non-violent action. It just seems a ridiculous assertion.
Can we look at non-violent direct action for a moment, please? We've heard a lot about it over the last couple of days. Can you assist us with your perspective on what the concept, purpose, nature of non-violent direct action was?
Yes. Well, I think it had a much longer history than the documents indicate. I know the Committee of 100, which was an offshoot of CND in its very early years, used non-violent direct action. The idea is direct action is some form of political protest that has either physical proximity to the object of the protest or some symbolic relationship with it. So that's direct action. The non-violent bit is setting out with a determination that your protest is not going to end up with fisticuffs and bricks and policemen knocked over. And in order to do that, you have to think it through carefully. Certainly, I think for the male protesters that was the case. Much less so for the women protesters, who wouldn't necessarily, if shoved, wouldn't retaliate, whereas the men obviously tended to. And so that it was a method of protesting. It wasn't a movement.
You've said it has a much longer historical context. In your mind and to your perception, did NVDA develop in any way during the period of your involvement with Greenham Common or Lambeth Women for Peace?
I think for me that was one of the attractions of both, that the direct action bit was so creative. I think, in a way, we were non-violent as feminists, whatever we were doing. But the sort of playfulness of many of the protests that were going on was what was so attractive, because it was a much better way of getting people's attention and getting them to listen. And people would be much happier to have a leaflet from you if you were smiling and dressed as a teddy bear than if you were holding a placard and looking rather menacing.
Were you ever part of conversations about what came within the concept of non-violent direct action, such as cutting the fence, whether that fell within that definition?
Well, I don't remember being present at any organised discussion of cutting the fence. Obviously, I had a lot of clients who were cutting the fence, so it was a daily reality to me. I certainly don't remember being present when it was planned, and that's partly because people would keep it away from me, because I was quite clear about my role.
Because of being a solicitor?
Yeah.
To your knowledge, did Lambeth Women for Peace or Greenham Common actions ever involve violence?
Never. Not on the part of the women. I think the police were very rough, and the soldiers were prepared to assault. I know on the Embrace the Base protest in December 1982, I was shaking the fence, I'll happily admit, along with other women. It just rattled it and made a noise and pointed out that we were present. And the soldiers were coming up inside the fence with confiscated bolt cutters and trying to hit you on the hand. If they hit you on the hand with one of those, fingers would break, and a number of women ended up with broken fingers. That was the sort of thing that went on there. And a police officer would, you know, there were often police watching this, never said anything, which I thought was a bit strange.
Can we look at public disorder now? You say in your witness statement you never heard of any public disorder at Greenham. How are you defining public disorder when you say that?
I think disorder is when people engage in threatening or intimidating behaviour or actually engage in some physical altercation that frightens people, harms them, and where it can't simply be stopped by saying, please stop that. And that would be my definition of disorder. I can't remember the actual wording offhand, but I know CPS have quite a neat explanation
I think
for
you
it
put
that amounts to that.
in your witness statement public order, intended to penalise the use of violence or intimidation is
Yes.
what you've quoted.
Yes.
We heard from HN 65 about encircling the airbase with a human chain. To your mind, would something like that involve public disorder?
No.
You said that you never heard of public disorder at Greenham. To your knowledge, did any Lambeth Women for Peace actions involve public disorder?
No.
I'd like now just to outline Greenham Women Against Cruise Missiles. This was a group formed in June 1983, I think is what you said. What was the purpose of Greenham Women Against Cruise Missiles?
It was a group of women who wanted to take the legal argument into court against the... Initially, they were interested in legal action against the UK government, but on reflection, it would work much better and was more appropriate against the US government, which actually was going to supply the weapons.
Was the purpose of the litigation to win some kind of remedy, or was it part of political action?
Both.
Can we look at UCPI 14442? UCPI 14442. It's B19, so.
Yes. Yeah.
It should come up on your screen. This is a report dated January 1985. Now I just want to look at paragraph 4, please, where you're described as Jane Hickman, the instigator of the whole case against President Reagan. Is that a fair description of you?
No.
What was your role in relation to Greenham Women Against Cruise Missiles?
I was one of the lawyers working on it.
I think it's right that you formed a claimant group to bring this, or a claimant group was formed, rather, to bring
Yes.
this action. How many people were in that group?
I think it was about 20.
And in general terms, who were they?
They were... I think there was one woman who was presently resident at the base, who was Rebecca Johnson, and the rest were either former residents or those who'd visited. Most of them had been to prison as a result of a protest at Greenham.
And I think it's right that the group set up fundraising teams in the US and the UK.
Yes.
And you've described there were 3 fundraising and support teams. What did they do broadly?
They organised written publicity, and they undertook speaking engagements and launched appeals for funds wherever they could.
Was HN33 any part of these arms of the group?
No, I don't believe so.
Did she attend any Greenham Women Against Crews meetings to discuss the case?
No, because we didn't hold public meetings. We were pretty much a closed group because this was litigation.
Can we turn now to HN33? She reported on Lambeth Women for Peace and Greenham Common between 1983 and 1986. So I think it's right that you and Lee Bonser would have overlapped from when she joined in summer 83
Yes.
to about 1985 when you broadly moved on from these groups.
Yes, I didn't attend meetings in 85, I don't think, except for one at the beginning.
Do you remember Lee Bonser?
I do, yes.
And can you help us with anything about her role in Lambeth Women for Peace or Greenham Common?
Well, again, she seemed to me to be just another member. She was a very helpful member, and she took the minutes pretty often.
Are you able to comment on whether she would have taken the minutes home, or is that a level of detail that you
I wouldn't
can't remember?
She
had a car. Did she ever drive you to any actions?
No, because I had a car as well. And I think both of us would have driven everywhere for one reason, which is we had to make sure we were able to get back at a particular time.
Do you have any recollection of her entering your home?
No, but I know she was in the group when I invited them all to a party at my house, and I can't remember whether she attended or not.
Did you view her with suspicion at the time?
No, not really, because I never thought that anything we did remotely approached the kind of activity that the police would be interested in. I was clearly wrong in that.
You described in your witness statement an incident where Lambeth Women for Peace tried to test HN33 with an incident on a bridge and to see whether the police would be in attendance. Do you have any personal knowledge of that?
I have only the vaguest recollection of the aftermath. I can't remember it being planned or set up.
Can you remember when it was?
No.
And what's your memory of the aftermath?
Well, there was just chat about Lee, a bit of speculation, but a lot of that anyway was quite humorous. So.
And what did you think to that speculation at the time?
I think it was said, and not only on that occasion, that we had nothing to hide, so what would it matter anyway?
HN33 mentions you in various reports, but I want to look at one which is solely about you, UCPI 14763. B17, sir. UCPI 14763. This report's dated the 23rd of November 1984 and reads, Jane Hickman, a member of Lambeth Women for Peace and one of the solicitors who act for the women peace campers at Greenham Common Air Base, is the registered keeper of a beige Volkswagen Golf motor car, gives the registration, and her address is already recorded. How do you feel about the fact that a report has been submitted on you, retained in special branch files and distributed to MI5?
I mean, I was aghast when I saw this. I think it's quite chilling. I can't see any legitimate reason for needing to know what car I drove. I don't know what they were planning or what might have happened, or even what did happen as a result.
We can take that report down now, thank you. I want to look briefly at the peace camp on Clapham Common, which I think you might already have referenced. This was 21st to the 24th of May 1983, just before Lee Bonser turned up at Lambeth Women for Peace. You shared some photographs of this event, UCPI 37036, so it should be an A15. UCPI 37036. I think, first of all, we've got a banner. If we can go to page 2, please. Unfortunately, they're in black and white, but are you able to help us with what's depicted here?
Yes, that was the peace camp on Clapham Common with a banner. I can't remember, that may be a no litter sign at the front. Well, I know one of the photos has a no litter sign, which was very typical of Lambeth Women for Peace. And there's a group of women having a chat on one side. The way they're standing, it rather looks like there's members of the public there because everybody's in a sort of orderly disposition.
Does this give us a sense of the size of the peace camp?
Yes, very much.
Can we...
There's another one.
Thank you. And page 4, please. I think you've said at the bottom we can see a music group playing.
Oh, yes. I believe it's the Women's Fallout Marching Band, it was called.
And page...
It's a
sorry.
mildly anti-nuclear music group.
Page 6, please. Can we see at the top a public address that's taking place
Yes.
during the event? And page 7, please. At the bottom, what can we see here?
That's one of the members dressed up in a way that was often adopted for demonstrative purposes, showing what you might look like after being slightly irradiated.
To whom was this peace camp advertised before it took place?
Well, I think it was quite widely advertised. I think it was in City Limits, the current affairs magazine, and we got it in wherever we could. I know it was covered on local radio, and as it went on, it was being reported in local papers.
And you've described there was a minimal police presence there.
Yes, I think, as Hilary said, I don't remember any police being there at all. It just wasn't that sort of thing.
Was there any disorder?
None whatsoever.
Is this typical of a Lambeth Women for Peace event?
It's pure Lambeth Women for Peace.
We can take that photograph down now, thank you. And we know that 1 month after this event, Lee Bonser joined Lambeth Women for Peace. I'd like to look at an event which I think you've already referenced, Hiroshima Day in 1983, yes, which is the 6th of August. If it assists, your diary that you've provided to the inquiry indicates that you were there that day, and I think you have a memory of it. Can we look at UCPI 19362? It's B3, sir. 19362. We can see this is a Lambeth Women for Peace meeting on the 27th of July 1983. 8 women attended. And paragraph 3, the first action the women are taking is on the 6th of August 83, Hiroshima Day, when they intend to sit outside the Imperial War Museum, Lambeth Road, SE1. At present, only 6 women have committed themselves to attend, and this is intended to be a peaceful action. And then can we look at another HN33 report? Sorry,
could I just comment on that?
Of course.
Because this is typical of the sort of reporting that goes on. We're going to sit outside the Imperial War Museum. I can remember that day reasonably clearly because it was baking hot and we were standing in the sunshine outside the Imperial War Museum in that heat. And it's the word sit. we weren't going to sit there because sitting down is what you do when you want to block the road, and we weren't trying to block entry into the War Museum. We were using the location because that's a form of direct action. It's a place, you know, it commemorates war, and war is what we're protesting about. There are many exhibits inside. In fact, I think Greenham has its own exhibit inside the Imperial War Museum now. Why is it reported as sitting? It's a ridiculous notion, but that's how the reporting seems to have worked all the way through.
So you dispute the accuracy of
I do.
that?
Yes, yes.
Can we look at another HN33 report about the same event, UCPI 19381? So this one's C8 in the HN33 section. This is the day before the action, the 5th of August 1983, and HN33 submits a report. Lambeth Women for Peace will stage a peaceful demonstration outside the Imperial War Museum at 12 noon on Saturday, the 6th of August, to commemorate Hiroshima Day. About 6 of the participants will be walking with their banners to the museum from an address, the home of 2 individuals, both of whom are active members of the group. As they have not informed the police of this part of the demonstration, they do not intend to walk in the road. The group hope to be joined by women from other groups, including Greenwich CND and Balham Greenham Women's Group, which may increase their numbers to about 20. And paragraph 5, please. After sitting outside the museum for some time, possibly until it is closed, the women intend to walk to Trafalgar Square via Parliament Square, where they will join the silent vigil organised by the Hampstead World Disarmament Campaign. Is there anything in this report that you dispute the accuracy of?
Well, I think, again, the sitting. I don't think we were planning to sit. But otherwise, it seems...
Do you remember there being 20 people?
No, I wouldn't have said it was that many, but that's, you know, memory's so faded, but I don't think it was that many.
It says that the police haven't been informed of this part of the demonstration. Had they been informed about any part of the demonstration?
Well, that seems to suggest that they had certainly been warned about the bit at the end, walking to Trafalgar Square, since the distinctions drawn between what the bit the police haven't been told about.
And the report says that it's a peaceful demonstration. Was it a peaceful demonstration?
Oh, yes, entirely.
Can we take that document down, please? I'd like now to look at some different LWP actions. Can we go to UCPI 19362? It's B3, sir. 19362. This is the document that we had just been looking at, but can we now look at paragraph 5, please? On a general basis, it was decided by the women that they should concentrate on a campaign of painting slogans on walls and pavements, protesting against the location of cruise missiles in this country. These will be directed at American targets, such as the embassy, the American Express Office, and American banks. Do you consider this to be accurate reporting?
I think this is the meeting that I'm not sure that I was at. I don't think I was at, because if I was there, I would have disagreed with that, in which case I would have expected it to be minuted, since there was apparently an interest in me.
You are listed on the bottom of the report as being in
Yes.
attendance at that meeting.
Oh, that's right. This is the one that I disagree with, the suggestion that I was present, because I think the Lambeth Women for Peace minutes show 4 of us present, which doesn't include me. That's most mysterious to me.
Do you remember any discussion of painting slogans on walls and pavements at Lambeth Women for Peace?
The thing was that the group really was a perpetual brainstorms. So you would throw out, all the women who were there would throw out all the creative ideas they had for some form of political action that would capture the imagination. And we'd talk about them maybe, or, you know, some just wouldn't get picked up. So there were discussions of all sorts of wild possibilities. The thing was, we couldn't decide on what we were going to do when we turned up somewhere, because you can't make binding decisions in a group that's entirely voluntary, that has no fixed membership, when you don't know who's going to be there, and the people who do turn up may have very different ideas from you. So the idea of deciding to do something like that doesn't seem very plausible. It's different when you decide on a campaign. We'll all campaign against this or that. You can sort of then navigate by that. But this is, no, I don't believe this happened in the way that it's expressed.
Did you act as a solicitor for members of Lambeth Women for Peace?
I know I acted for individuals on occasions.
Did you ever represent anybody who'd been charged with graffiti or using paint in protest at Lambeth Women for Peace?
No, and I don't believe that happened. I would have known about that because I would have been the one who was contacted.
Can we look at the UTC pickets that
Yes.
Lambeth Women for Peace organised, United Technology Corporation? We looked at this with Hilary Moore this morning. You say in your witness statement that you do remember discussion about this kind of event because you thought there was an oddity about it. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes.
In terms of the subsidiary?
Well, I always thought it was strange because, of course, the subsidiary was owned by a weapons manufacturer, but the subsidiary and its staff really would have no control about who it was owned by. Would have no influence over it that I could see. I'm not sure that my objection was terribly logical. I think it was more of an emotional objection to the notion. It just seemed too remote to me and not terribly appealing. It was more time standing on the pavement and then having to explain why you were there in the first place.
So you do remember some discussion about UTC within Lambeth Women for Peace?
Yeah.
Can we look at a document UCPI 20420? So it's B10. 20420. Oh, this is a note of a meeting, a report of a meeting on the 14th of August 1984. We can see at the bottom of the first page your name is there as a person being present. But I think that your evidence in your witness statement is that you weren't present at this meeting.
I'm sorry, I can't see it well enough
Can we
to
zoom in
make out
on
much
the
of it.
bottom of
Thank you.
your name is listed. The following women are identified at the meeting, and your name is there, but your evidence in your witness statement is that you don't accept that. I'll take you to
That might be helpful if I could look at it.
in your witness statement. It's paragraph 181 and I think also 172.
Yes. Yes.
Can we look, well, firstly at paragraph 2, just incidentally, the meeting was at South London Hospital for Women. The women have decided that whilst the hospital is occupied by those campaigning, they will hold all their meetings on the premises. Is this an example of another action that Lambeth Women for Peace supported, the South London Women's Hospital?
I think it was just a decision to hold the meetings there. I don't think it was specifically an action.
If we can turn to paragraph 5, please. Proposals for the type of action to be taken against UTC are still very much at the discussion stage. However, it would seem that most women are in favour of direct action against the building at 43 Clapham Road, for example, paint spraying graffiti, followed by a continuous picket on the other side of the road with large banners or placards. The women decided at the meeting that no discussion of the form of action should take place over the phone, and that the name of the company, i.e. Otis Elevators, should not be used. And your position, I think, is that you don't accept you were at this meeting.
I don't believe I was, no. I think I would certainly have objected to the idea of paint spraying on Clapham Road, especially as the demonstrations were going to take place in rush hour. So we would be displaying the spectacle of a number of us being dragged away, having left graffiti on a building in Clapham Road, which already wasn't a very attractive road. And I would have thought this is not going to win hearts and minds.
So your evidence is that this intelligence report is inaccurate because you weren't there, but perhaps you can't speak to whether that was a brainstorming idea someone put out.
Oh, I think it could easily have been. And it often, well, I won't say it often was. It was the sort of thing that would get said because people had different ideas of what was appropriate. It wasn't in the culture of Lambeth Women for Peace, as I knew it, to pick up on them and adopt them. And I think a number of us would have said, no, that isn't a great idea. It may be that that did happen and I did say it and it's not been recorded, but that's not terribly satisfactory either.
We saw this morning a document I put up with Hilary Moore that, in fact, the picket was placards and banners, and that's her memory of it as well.
Yes, that was a later decision. I see there is a later decision that says not paint but banners, which does seem to suggest that there had been a pro-paint discussion, but how far it had gone. But I think at least it demonstrates that Lambeth Women for Peace wasn't generally very favourable towards painting on the walls in Lambeth.
Did you attend any of the UTC pickets yourself?
No. And I was dropping out by then. I think it was possibly a contributor to my feeling that I should move on because I did have these other cases and engagements that were calling to me.
We talk about Cruise Watch. Were you ever in attendance at a Cruise Watch event?
No.
Were you ever called on the telephone tree? We saw that your name was included.
No, and I don't accept that that was a telephone tree for Cruise Watch. I think it was the Lambeth Women for Peace telephone tree. It would have been used for Cruise Watch as it was used for many other things. But if you think back to then, there was no internet, there were no mobile phones, there weren't even pagers. So if you wanted to contact other members of the group between meetings and you wanted to reach most of them, you had to have a telephone tree. So it's how groups, it's how politics, it's how everything. It was probably how the golf club kind of got word around as well. You'd have to be very well resourced to have somebody sit there for a couple of hours and ring all the members one after another. So the telephone tree is a cheap way of ensuring that communication does take place.
On Cruise Watch, you heard Hilary Moore's evidence this morning that I pulled up the 1986 SDS annual report, which stated that brake lines had been cut on a cruise convoy. To your knowledge, did any Cruise Watch action cut any brake lines? Were you ever aware of that or heard?
It seems an extraordinary suggestion because there would often, as I understood it, be women lying down in front of a missile launcher, and you really don't want to be cutting the brake pipe lines in a launch you're going to lie down in front of. It just doesn't ring true to me. But of course, there could have been many people who would have done it who weren't necessarily associated with Greenham.
Is cutting brake lines consistent with the kind of action that you associated with Greenham?
Never, not in one's wildest dreams.
Can we look at some more detail relating to Greenham women against Crews now? Can we have up, please, UCPI 19646? So it's C23 in HN33's bundle, UCPI 19646. This report is dated the 28th of October 1983. Greenham Women Against Crews hold a current account with the National Westminster Bank, and it gives the account number. Although the present balance of the account is not known, the women collected £3,000 approximately at the recent CND demonstration in London. HN33's evidence on this is that she can't recall how she came to know this information, but it's possible she took the proceeds of the collection from the CND demonstration and thereby obtained the bank details. Are you able to help with how she would have found out the Greenham Women Against Crews missile bank details?
No, I've no idea, and I hadn't seen this report. It wasn't part of my initial disclosure, I don't believe. So I didn't see it until it turned up on Epic. And I was horrified by it, because this is really a kind of deliberate intrusion into a group that's conducting litigation, and I can't understand why, even to HN33, the lack of propriety wasn't obvious.
Can we look now at UCPI 19613? It's B4 in the Hickman bundle, sir. UCPI 19613. This is a report dated the 3rd of October 1983. Paragraph 2, let me start at paragraph 1. Submitted herewith as a leaflet. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the leaflet. Produced by the campaign Greenham Women Against Crews, which has been received from a secret and reliable source. The campaign, although using the name Greenham and run by some of the women occupants of the peace camp at Greenham Common, is a separate entity which has been formed to organise legal action against the American government. The women intend to charge President Reagan and the US government with conspiracy to commit genocide. They are bringing their case on international law, brackets treaties that the US government has signed, the gas laws and human rights and American Constitution. There will be 6 women plaintiffs. 3 women have already travelled to the USA from Wales, privacy from the Isle of Wight and privacy from London, where they are attempting to raise over $60,000. In London, supporters have started to raise £20,000 towards court costs. It is proposed to file the papers at a federal court on the 9th of November. And I perhaps need not read the entirety of that report, but it sets out in detail the Greenham Women Against Crews litigation. And paragraph 6, the campaign is headed in the country by Jane Hickman of 42 Trent Road, the solicitor for Greenham Women. She is assisted by privacy from the London Greenham office and privacy from the camp. They've been provided with office facilities at Fisher Meredith Solicitors, which I think is the firm that you were working at this time. How public was the campaign at the point of this report in October 1983?
Entirely. I think in my bundle is a cutting from The Guardian that is dated September 83 prior to this, which provides almost all of this information.
Describing you as heading the campaign in this country, what's your view on that?
Well, again, I couldn't head a litigation group where I represented the clients. I acted at their direction, and I really did. And there were some very, very strong personalities involved. So I was happy to participate in discussions, but I couldn't head it or instigate it or lead it in any way.
The fundraising targets that we can see in paragraph 4, would these have been public knowledge?
I doubt it, because it sounds like a huge sum, but I was only a tip of the iceberg legally. There were 4 lawyers working full-time on it for months in New York. And we also had to raise travel costs for, I think in the end there were 12 or 13 plaintiffs travelling to America, plus we had to support two administrative teams over there, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. So the kind of money we were raising was fairly modest crowdfunding.
You said that Lee Bonser wasn't involved in Green and Women Against Crews. Are you able to assist with how she would have known about the fundraising targets?
I can only surmise that I may have communicated it within Lambeth Women for Peace, but I can't be certain at all.
Can we take that document down? Thank you. Ultimately, in November 1983, the litigation came before the federal court for an interim restraint order, and I think that application and the appeal itself was unsuccessful.
Yes.
Can we look at another report, UCPI 20789, C50 in the HN33 bundle, sir? This report gives detail about various matters, but I'd like please to look at paragraph 7. And going over the page as well. At present, so this is April 1984, at present there is considerable ill feeling and tension between the camp women, including those living at the house, I think that's the London house, and the Green and Women Against Crews. This is mainly caused by a personality clash, and at present no effort has been made by either group to resolve their differences. Because of the attitude of the camp women, Green and Women Against Crews have stopped organising or assisting in the planning of any actions and are simply waiting for the judge in America to make his decision regarding the court case against President Reagan. However, there are some women who are involved in the camp or with its support groups, and also with Green and Women Against Crews, viz. Rebecca Johnson, who lives at the camp and is a plaintiff in the court case, Privacy, who works in the Green and Women Against Crews office and is a member of Lambeth Women for Peace, an active support group. Is this a fair description of the ill feeling and tension?
It's not that it's inaccurate, it's that I think it's disproportionate, because I don't believe that a majority of the women at the camp had any difference with Green and Women Against Crews, and I know that many of them supported it and thought it was a wonderful thing to do. But there was this very vocal minority at the camp who also came under suspicion of being possibly a CIA agent provocateur element that was hostile to Gwackham, as we called it. And I think the reason that that's not adequately emphasised is because HN33 regarded the London office as being a place where you could learn something useful, but in terms of the sort of divided nature of a small faction at the camp, those who were at the London office at different times were perhaps part of the discontented faction, And so what she would hear was gossip. And it's just slightly worrying that HN33 wasn't better at looking a bit deeper at what was going on and having a more kind of sociological perspective. They keep looking for splits and flaws and breakdown. And the camp there were great weaknesses in the political organisation of the camp and its ability to mount and execute a strategy, but she's possibly misidentified what those weaknesses were, and that's a failure in her reporting.
Can we move forward almost a year to UCPI 14442? That's 3 4s, 14442. B19, sir, in the Jane Hickman bundle. This is dated 11th of January 1985. Can you help with where this falls? In fact, the document may be able to answer that question. After months of silence, Green and Women Against Crews may be revived, if only for a few days. A decision as to whether the women will be able to take legal action against President Reagan will be made in the USA on Monday, the 21st of January 1985. So was that the appeal? Or you may not be able to remember the dates.
Was it the appeal?
Perhaps it doesn't matter too much.
I'm sorry, blank.
To public,
it was. Yes, of course, it was the appeal. Yes, it was the appeal.
Paragraph 3. To publicise this, the women intend to hold an early morning demonstration outside the American Embassy, Grosvenor Square, W1, on Friday, 18th of January. And mention has been made of some participants attempting to gain entry to the building to ask for asylum. Few details are known about this action, as the organiser, Privacy, is still in the USA working for the campaign. Jane Hickman, the instigator of the whole case, which we saw earlier, against President Reagan, is due to fly there on Thursday, the 17th of January, for the hearing. Mm-hmm. Were you aware of the plan for a demonstration outside the American Embassy and people attempting to gain entry and ask for asylum?
I think I would have known about the demonstration, but I think asking for asylum, I don't believe that happened. And that sounds to me like a perfect example of a brainstorm. I mean, it's quite a funny and creative idea that we would all turn up and seek asylum since we were now under such imminent nuclear threat. But I don't think anybody would want to try and practice. It wasn't exactly a friendly environment in the American Embassy.
How do you feel about it being reported that you're due to fly to America on Thursday, the 17th of January for the hearing?
Well, it's just par for the course, isn't it? My movements were being carefully watched as I went about my job, my lawful job.
As we've already said, the litigation was unsuccessful. Can you outline for us what you feel it did achieve?
I think it expanded what they call the Overton window now of discussion. It assembled such an array of expertise that it was a huge resource ongoing. And that was achieved, really, because so many lawyers worked on it and we had enough resource to do the job properly. So we put together a real library of materials that would stand in good stead in the future. One effect, I think, that Rebecca Johnson attributes to the court case was that the papers really brought about the foundation of the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, which then won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years, well, it was a lot of years later.
One final document on a different topic. Can we turn back to UCPI 14796? It's B18, sir, in the Hickman bundle. 14796. We saw this document earlier. It's about a meeting, an LWP meeting on the 27th of November 1984. Can we turn to paragraph 7, please? So various matters were dealt with in the meeting, and then HN33 reports Jane Hickman then spent an hour speaking about what could happen to women arrested during a demonstration or action. On the whole, she felt that peace protesters were treated better than other arrested persons, but that the London police were far worse than Newbury police. She stressed that women should not physically resist arrest, as they could be charged with assault on police, and not to intervene in the arrest of others, as this could mean an obstructing police charge. Although she maintained there is no power to arrest for obstructing police in the course of their duty, she added that this information should not be divulged to the police at the time of arrest. If no other charge than obstruction was made, it should be used later when suing for wrongful arrest. Hickman quoted a figure of about £500 an hour for wrongful detention. Other advice Hickman gave was that they should always ask what they were being arrested for, as this made it slightly more difficult for the police to change the charge at a later time. She advised the women to say absolutely nothing during an interview, and added that if they were arrested for an offence similar to obstruction of the highway, to maintain their right not to be strip searched and never to allow photographs to be taken. Firstly, in general terms, without giving names, to whom were you giving this advice?
Well, that would have been to members of Lambeth Women for Peace.
Was it a public meeting that anyone could have walked into?
Well, all members of Lambeth Women for Peace were public, but I think at that stage we knew each other.
Do you remember this being in anticipation of a particular event?
Well, at that point, it was quite busy in terms of arrests, including, I think, what was the date of this report? I'm sorry, could you remind me?
Could we zoom out, please? It's the report is the 27th of November 1984.
Yes.
The meeting is the 27th, I think, of November.
Yes. So quite a few Lambeth Women for Peace were being arrested by that time at various demonstrations at Greenham. And one of my concerns about this is that there were some people who were looking to me for advice on that occasion, because very few of the defendants at Newbury Magistrates' Court who appeared in relation to Greenham charges were granted legal aid. And it wasn't possible to, even if I'd wanted to, one couldn't have represented those numbers without funding. And so this was an opportunity for people to raise question about their cases, which makes it particularly unacceptable and unpleasant that a police officer was sat there listening to us.
So did people ask you questions particular to their own cases in this meeting?
Well, that was happening all the time. Yes, I mean, I was often asked questions of that nature in meetings, and that one in particular, because we were devoting a whole session to it.
Did you consider yourself to be the solicitor to all the people in that meeting?
Well, I think I've said in my statement, it was really quite difficult to tell, because once you'd sort of dealt with people in relation to the criminal justice environment, they tended to regard you, if you were a solicitor, as their solicitor, and feel that somehow they had you on, well, you didn't have speed dial back then, but more or less they could ring you any time of day or night and get some free advice, which I went along with by and large. I was perfectly happy for people to do that, because that was so fitted with my own ethos. And so this question of whether there was a retainer or not was always slightly blurry, but I would have regarded Lambeth Women for Peace as all having a retainer with me and entitled to have confidential legal advice, including in a meeting when it was us who were present.
So you considered the entirety of the audience of that presentation to have an implicit retainer
Well, I
with you?
think so, yes. I mean, it's difficult to remember the specifics at this distance, but I know that that's how practice was back then. And I had so many other criminal clients with a similar view.
Was there any discussion before you started this presentation about confidentiality within the group?
No, we were so much less aware of all this sort of thing back then.
Do you consider this to be a breach of legal professional privilege?
I think the risk is really high. I can't be specific, but I think it's real, that risk.
Ultimately, would you have given this advice if you'd known there was a police officer in the room?
No. Well, I think there's something I said, don't mention this to the police. And the reason for that is it's before PACE, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, I'm not sure if it had been passed, but it hadn't come into force until I think April 1985. And pre-PACE, the whole question of arrest and what was a lawful arrest was very, very different. And as I've said, there was no power to arrest for obstructing the police in the execution of their duty. So it was quite advantageous, since if you were going to be arrested, not to mention it to them, because then you had a bit of something to go back at them with when they preferred their charges against you. It was a bit of tactical advice there, which I'd rather not have shared with the police quite so explicitly.
We can have that document taken down now. I think you first became aware of undercover policing in 2021 via the inquiry.
Yes.
How do you feel about the fact that you were the subject of undercover policing?
I mean, I was terribly disappointed. I was shocked, disappointed, rather horrified, and really appalled, as Hilary said, by the waste of funding, because having practiced in legal aid for those years, although it was reasonably generous at the beginning, it got over the whole of my career, it constantly got tighter, and we were so aware of not wasting money. And it was something I hated anyway, wasting money. I've always been a skinflint in practice as in personal life. And the idea that they were expending, I believe the cost was said at the time to be up to £250,000 a year per officer working undercover, that they had that small change to throw around. It's just horrific. In 20 years after that, I was a member of the Legal Services Commission, and I remember every day that a minister failed to sign some statutory instrument into law was costing £500,000. And we waited something like 5 or 6 days longer than perhaps we needed to, and £3 million went down the drain. Well, the undercover police 20 years before that were throwing millions of pounds down the drain every year, and it's a terrible waste.
What, if any, impact has it had on you to know that you were the subject of undercover policing?
I just think it's absurd and very alarming, because I think if it happened to me, it could happen to just about anyone. I know my views were on the left still at that period, and I was a feminist, but these were mainstream ideas. I was introduced to Marxism by a British university, not by some secret Soviet cabal. I find it inexplicable. But the other impact I worry, I've worried for a long time, is that when I was made redundant on the closure of Balham Law Centre in 1980, I tried very, very hard to get a public sector job in a local authority, because my expertise was housing and employment primarily at that stage, and I knew quite a lot about it, and I'd also worked on issues of using the law for the purpose of economic development in North Kensington. And I had the kind of CV at that point where every job I applied for I would get. And I applied to countless local authorities and nobody wanted me. And I finally plucked up the courage to ring Lambeth Council Legal Department and ask why I hadn't been employed. I was just curious, and somebody said rather apologetically it was because I was thought to be too political. And I had never understood that, because this was before the internet, before they could look you up.
Was this in 1980, did you say?
1980. So now I think my 1977 special branch file may have had something to do with that, and the blacklisting process that we now know went on. I haven't included that in my statement because I wasn't sure it was relevant, but since you ask about impact.
So I have no further questions. I think we now need to pause for the Rule 10 procedure.
We do indeed, and it may or may not be relevant, but I strongly doubt that your 1977 record in the Register at Special Branch had anything to do with undercover policing.
Yes.
I suspect it predated that, but who knows?
Well, I have no idea what it's about, but thank you.
Right, we will now adjourn for 15 minutes while Rule 10 questions are asked.
No worries.
So no questions have been submitted to me.
Yes, Mr. Wood.
Yes, and I only have this. Is there anything or any part of the answers that you've given, Sir John, which you yourself feel needs to be clarified in any way?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
As I say to every witness who's helped me in the inquiry, thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to do so. Your evidence, like that of all other witnesses who are in that category, has been greatly helpful. Thank you. Then that, I think, finishes proceedings for today. Indeed, I think in this hearing room for this week.
Indeed.
We will resume on Monday at 10.